Hello and welcome back to Newsline, brought to you by People's TV. In today's news commentary, we turn our focus to the Islamic Republic of Iran. First, a brief note on international developments. Benjamin Netanyahu is currently in Florida to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump, where Iran will be a key topic of discussion. Meanwhile, Iran's domestic situation is shifting dramatically, as public outrage spills into the streets, a level of unrest rarely seen in the country's recent history. Iran is grappling with a severe economic crisis. As of this report, the Iranian rial has fallen to 1.4 million per US dollar, pushing citizens to the brink. In response, authorities have imposed strict vehicle restrictions, dictating which days cars with odd or even license plates may travel. Inflation has surged past 70%, creating unbearable pressure on ordinary Iranians. Protests, initially concentrated in Tehran, have now spread to Mashhad, Karaj, and several other cities. Citizens from all walks of life are taking to the streets. With the economy at rock bottom, many Iranians are struggling to afford even 3 full meals a day, highlighting the depth of the nation's crisis. This reality has been highlighted repeatedly. Iran's political climate cannot be corrected through presidential elections, as the presidency holds little real authority. Power remains firmly in the hands of the clerical establishment, where religious ideology dictates governance and elected leaders function largely as symbolic figures under cleric control. Public anger has now reached a breaking point. Footage circulating on social media shows protesters attacking a vehicle linked to a senior cleric in broad daylight. Such scenes never appear on state-controlled outlets, as the Ayatollah-led regime tightly dominates mainstream media. Journalists who challenge the system have been silenced through imprisonment or execution, while those still working avoid criticism out of fear for their lives under an openly repressive government. Access to information is also heavily restricted. Ordinary Iranians are denied an open internet, while a privileged minority is issued so-called white SIM cards that grant unrestricted access. Most citizens rely on VPNs to bypass censorship, underscoring how tightly information is controlled and how desperate people have become to stay informed. As a result, the Iranian public has reached a point where revolution is increasingly viewed as inevitable. Revolutions are not foreign to Iran. The current supreme leadership itself emerged from the 1979 uprising. Political analysts now warn that another rupture is approaching, driven by the belief that only a mass uprising can dismantle clerical dominance, as electoral politics have consistently failed to deliver meaningful reform. Recent history reinforces this view. Masoud Pezeshkian was elected through a democratic process, yet even his limited reform efforts, including attempts to ease mandatory hijab regulations, were blocked. Ultimate authority remains concentrated in the hands of the clerics, rendering elections ineffective and exposing the deep structural paralysis within Iran's political system. Recently, Iranian media have reported that the government appears to be easing certain religious regulations, including laws governing the hijab. This move is widely seen as an attempt at survival, rooted in fears that a nationwide uprising would bring the Ayatollah regime to collapse. The public, however, is no longer deceived. After decades of repression, these gestures are recognized as superficial concessions rather than real reform. Trust has eroded beyond recovery, and many Iranians believe such measures have come far beyond the point of credibility. Shifting focus back to the United States and the State of Israel, these protests have erupted at a moment when the leaders of 2 of the world's most powerful nations are reportedly discussing strategies to confront and dismantle the Ayatollah dictatorship in Iran. Certain ideological groups may resist this interpretation, yet the facts remain open for independent verification. When Donald Trump was first elected president, many Iranians celebrated openly, hoping his administration would intensify international pressure on Tehran. Their expectation was clear: a path toward regime change. With Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu meeting once again, the current wave of protests may be intended to reinforce those discussions. Notably, the unrest began only after Netanyahu commenced his visit to the United States, and protest slogans themselves explicitly reference regime change. Demonstrating in Iran carries extreme risk. Nearly 2,000 Iranians have reportedly been executed this year alone. The Ayatollah regime operates as a dictatorship that systematically crushes free speech and rules through fear rather than consent. Footage has already surfaced showing demonstrators attacking a vehicle linked to a senior cleric. Similar confrontations have occurred in earlier years whenever the authorities pushed harsh religious mandates. The current unrest, however, signals something far more significant. After enduring decades of economic suffering, people are no longer reacting to isolated policies, they are openly challenging the system itself with the expectation of fundamental change. From this perspective, Iran requires a complete political reset. Authoritarian rule, especially when justified through religious doctrine, has no legitimate place in modern governance. If the unrest continues, the possibility of systemic collapse becomes real. Although national elections are approaching, they hold little practical value, as voting does not alter the clerical hierarchy that controls the state. Iran's recovery depends on dismantling that power structure, and the current protesters are likely paving the way for such an outcome. If this report helped you see the situation on the ground clearly, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to People's TV, where truth has no agenda, and facts speak louder than spin.
Subscribe us for more details.